Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Critical Fools podcast. This week we are reviewing a pretty famous cult classic film. This is an anime from 1997, a Satoshi Kon directed movie called Perfect Blue. I'd recently come across this movie. I know it's super famous, and I'm kind of like way behind the times in terms of some of these classic anime films. My co-host here, Chris, put me onto a lot, especially over the pandemic. So we kind of had our run of different anime series and movies, several of which we've reviewed on this podcast before. But yeah, this was a really interesting movie. I really like the style, and I see after watching it how influential this film has been for a lot of subsequent movies that have come out after. But yeah, I thought it was really interesting. I know this is not your first time seeing this, Chris. You've probably seen this several times. I just kind of want to get your thoughts on the most recent time that you watched this movie, and if you had any thoughts.
Yeah, well, I think I've seen the movie twice. I don't watch much anime these years, unfortunately, but so I'll say that I have not stayed up to date with the modern tastes.
Sure.
But Satoshi Kon, he's probably one of the best directors I've ever had the privilege of watching his films. Like, everybody talks about the new Korean wave, and they're really good, and I like them a lot. But I remember when I was like really, I want to say in college, watching my first time watching Perfect Blue, or maybe it was senior year of high school. It was that era of like I was like 17 to like 20,
Mhm.
and I just remember like watching this film and going like, whoa. And the only reason I watched it again is that when my sister got a little bit older, we watched it together. And it's because like it's a film that was way ahead of its time in terms of not just its topics, but its style, as well as I think touching upon some really deep realities of like late 1990s Japan, around idol culture, around identity, around a lot of different let's say mental health before it was called mental health. And I think people forget also that I'm like 99% sure it was like Satoshi Kon's like one of his early films. It might have been even his first. I'm gonna double check this. It was not his first, but it was like he had done other films, but like this is the one that like
This kind of broke him through into the scene.
Yeah, because he had done like other movies that I think were good, and they are known for for those, let's say, subcultures. Oh, he did Memories too. Never mind. This is his second. This is probably the one he's most famous for, but actually Memories is also good. I've actually only not seen one of, other than his early works that are too early for me to like, because it's like he did like the second movie of a trilogy, so it's kind of hard to like watch the whole thing. But I think out of the ones that he's famous for, like Tokyo Godfathers, Millennium Actress, and Paprika, I've only not seen Millennium Actress, but Perfect Blue is definitely like one of my favorites. And what I wanted to, I guess I'll ask you the question is, well, we'll do a little plot spoiler. How did you because the first time is always like the first time you can ever reproduce it. Like when the plot twists, how did you like those? Those, I thought they were well crafted.
They were very well done, because this film does a good, and I think it might just be a benefit of the medium of kind of anime style in general, or just something that's animated. I think it was just easier for them to like write or come across with those transitions where you don't really see it coming. I don't know if this film, if you made like a live action adaptation, if it would have been as seamless, if that makes sense. And it's hard to explain why, but the way they did it, they wrote it in and animated it, was just perfect, especially with those scenes where she's kind of chasing or like running away from her stalker, like going from building. You can't really reproduce that in kind of in the same way in a live action style. Yeah, I didn't quite see that coming. I knew there was going to be some twist. With a lot of films, you can kind of see them coming. I couldn't quite see it in the way, but I knew there was something that was off, especially when like even in her delusion state, she's like, am I imagining things? and then you realize at the end that she really wasn't. She was just being drugged the entire time. But yeah, kudos to the style and directing and writing of this film, because I did not see quite a few of those, and it really added to the, especially with, I will say, the music they had, the kind of creepy droning really added to the aesthetic, and at times did give me a couple chills.
Yeah, and we'll talk about some of those critical scenes, but what I also will mention is that, like, probably why I like Aronofsky is that he's copied from this film, I think, a scene from this film too, is Requiem for a Dream, and he's obviously mentioned that Black Swan is one of his most famous films ever, has a lot of influences from Perfect Blue.
Do you know what scene was taken in Requiem from the Dream from this?
Yeah, because I've seen Requiem for a Dream. It's the bathtub scene.
Yeah, and I was like, wow. I was like, I could see why that really influenced him.
Yeah, I liked Requiem for a Dream. I actually never watched Black Swan, so I got to get to that. But I'm a huge Aronofsky fan, so I love.
Well, yeah, we reviewed one.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we did. Yes. Yeah. We should do Requiem for a Dream is good. I think it's a bit overrated, actually, but we won't get into that film.
I could see that.
I think he has better works, but yeah. So going back to Perfect Blue, yeah. So I think anime does allow you to do something stylistically that helps, because I think what really shines here is that like you said, the transitions, but also how like anime, because it is like a drawn medium, it was able to play even better with, because I know like other filmmakers like Nolan and others try to like manipulate time and reality.
Yeah.
The thing with anime is that you can, if you do it really well, like this film does, you really can't distinguish until it's actually revealed to you. It's really hard, even though there's little clues. Like when you go back and you rewatch it, you realize that all the people dying have to deal with her new role. She doesn't know anything about the website, but I think the real early hint is that the Uchida, the stalker character, you see scenes with him that he's getting these notes from Mima's room, right? That creepy website.
Yeah.
And so like
you don't know, you think it's him
yeah. But once that's kind of revealed that he's not getting those messages, then your mind should go to like, who else could do this? And then you're led down the path of like, oh, it's just Mima because like she's got maybe some personality issues. Yeah, it's all layered. That's the thing that's good, is that it's like usually in this movie a plot twist is like, that's the trick. Like I like
you had no idea.
Yeah, I like Unusual Suspects, but it's like there was one twist. Here it's like multiple, like the twists were layered. It was like really good. Yeah. It was like, oh, I got it figured out, and you're like, what?
When it's revealed, you're like, yo.
This is wild. Yeah, there's people who watch this film on like drugs, and they say this is an unusual experience too. So.
Oh yeah, I couldn't. I feel like I would be panicking a little bit watching that.
Yeah, we still gotta do Hereditary, so don't worry.
Yeah.
But this is like the typical, like not horror, but like psychological thriller. So, but anyways, I think let's go back because we already spoiled the plot a little bit, but. I would say like the backdrop is interesting, right? So like, we kind of have something similar here in the sense of like how we treat celebrities, but we don't have a true, what we call quote unquote, like in Korea and Japan, idol culture, right? And that's very specific to, I think, those two countries, especially. We'll focus on Japan. But yeah, I don't know if you ever watched documentaries of like Korean idol culture.
Especially with K-pop groups.
Yeah, I think K-pop is what got it kind of over here more mainstream for people to be more of the consciousness. But before K-pop boomed here, like in Japan or Korea, like the idol culture was very like systematic, right? Like it's in America we like an artist that rises up and is creative, but like they've created like a conveyor belt of talent.
Yeah, so here there's always a like it's funny, especially in like hip hop or some of those communities. Because it's something I've followed pretty close, and I've gotten you into that a little bit. But anytime it seems like an artist, it just rises up in this weird way, like almost inorganically. Like it's known as an industry plant, and there's like a subset of like music fans here in the States who feel like they try to spot that out and almost like a conspiracy theory. Whereas in like Korea and Japan, to your point, the whole system is structured in a way where they just turn out all of these, like that they are propped up specifically from the industry.
Yeah.
So, sorry.
No,
I
I
just want
agree.
to talk about the difference.
No, and I think the reason it's done that way, and I think it's the reason actually the people who have conspiracies are probably not far off, is that for these like media companies, it's just more efficient to have a conveyor belt approach versus like we need to find the next thing, and then like if you don't find this person, then you're like screwed, right? But if you could control the conveyor belt, then you always got that consistent top talent coming through.
Yeah, you're not taking any risk.
Yeah, but what I've learned from modernity is that people don't like risk. But anyways, that's a separate topic. And
I think I don't even know if it's, this is getting more philosophical. I don't even know if that's a product of modernity. That just might be human nature.
No, human nature.
But anyway,
Watchmen. We'll get to that film someday. Anyways, yeah. But yeah, so what I wanted to touch upon is that, in this conveyor belt culture, right? Like eventually, as an artist that you're going to be obsolete. So there is that fixed timeline. Also, idol culture, and this is what's interesting, right? That it's very predicated on these. It's almost like their version of like our Disney Channel. Like these are skew young, and they need to be talented, but also project like almost like an image of purity.
yeah.
Of like, and actually, I'm going to use the Disney Channel.
It's almost like innocence, and it's weird.
Yeah,
I'm just not part of that society.
And it reminds me of, I think the closest analogy we have is actually Disney Channel. This is why a lot end up going like Miley Cyrus is probably our best example of like, she was Hannah Montana, then she became Wrecking Ball, and then she became Flower. I don't know, it's just weird with her transition.
Well, yeah, even some of the Nickelodeon stars, like it's weird, like how many of them have turned out screwed up who were like child stars there.
Yeah. Hearing what Josh Peck has said about the
you said okay, that's exactly what we're thinking of.
Yeah, it's been very intriguing. But I agree. But basically, like that's the closest analogy we have in our society to this idol culture, which is still really different. Like I was reading an article like years ago that they're on diets at 15, they're training. It's like a whole regimen. Like it's basically their career until they're obsolete. And then the problem is that they're just discarded and they just become like nobody. So Mima is she's torn between something that she's really successful and she does enjoy, but also understanding that like she probably needs to start thinking of branching out on her terms versus.
Well, but it's also like what she truly wants to do. I think she kind of views it as kind of like, okay, like I've done this, like it's okay, but it's not fully fulfilling. I've always wanted to be an actress.
Yes.
And she risked it all for that. In a way, it kind of reminds me of Birdman, with Keaton's film being like, all right, I've done kind of this, I've been a big star, but it wasn't quite fulfilling, so I want to do my true passion. And it was a big risk they took with that.
Yeah. And so she's trying to go through this transition. Her manager is in support. Rumi is the only one that is her. So Rumi is her agent, her biggest fan, as I would say. Her biggest fan, her agent, is not like really
the one who seems to have her best interest in mind at all time.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be all for this. Because the early kind of like intense turning point in the film is that and I get this, actually many actors go through this, especially actors who are working sitcom or Disney Channel, right? They try to do like a serious movie. Like you hear this all the time, even from our Hollywood actors, like I need to get in a serious movie where like it's just me and the world, And, the screenwriter writes, I think it's a cop show, right? Cop mystery show, and writes her in as it's a minor part, but one of the critical scenes she has is a gang rape scene.
That was insane.
Dude, when I first saw that, I was like, wait, are we allowed to do this on TV or movies, dude? Like this in America would be like a controversy.
I felt controversy, like, I almost like had to turn away. I was like, what am I watching?
you're watching cinema at its highest order, dude. Anyways, and so this is like a real early conjecture point. Actually, one thing I want to ask you is because you're gonna watch Kids, and actually, there's a good overlap with this around. One of the things that Kids got attacked for was that it was very, on the edge, and what really gave it the NC-17 rating in the end was because it dealt with teens.
Yeah.
Being on the edge. This film, I believe, because it was animated, was actually rated just R.
Okay.
And I'm curious about, because I know you at least have some respect for the medium. When you watch Kids, I just as a question for the future. So I'm planting.
I haven't seen it.
Yeah. When you watch it, what I'm curious about asking you next time is like, do you think they should have had the same rating or should it have just been rated R? Because that's a debate point.
For this film?
No, for Kids when you get to it. Because
this
scene is pretty strong. And I think if it wasn't for it was being animated, it would have been like, yo, we need to bump up this. Like, this is not for like.
Yeah, to be fair, it's like how, and this is my issue with ratings, it's very subjective. Because I think you could have made an argument for another film we reviewed in a very different way that personally, like, I think you could have been justified in making American History X NC-17 for some of the strong racial scenes there. Like, there's some of the strongest scenes I think I've seen in any, and we reviewed some films from the 60s that weren't even as, that dealt with racial undertones that weren't even as bad. But that was, like, Edward Norton's performance, kudos to him, but some of the, like, the curb stomp scene, like, scenes like that.
Oh, that was a tough one.
Yeah, you get what I'm saying?
PG-13. Anyways, yeah.
PG-13, you're insane, dude.
Every movie's PG-13 in my book, dude.
Yeah, but you get my point. It's like, where do you draw the line? Like, you can make an argument in many different ways that certain films should be rated either higher or lower. So it's kind of hard to say.
What I've learned from our rating system in America is that you get that rating when you touch a topic that's taboo for the time at least, or taboo historically. Because what I've noticed is that whenever I come across NC-17 films, either deals with minors,
which is understandable,
or incest, and it's like always gets that rating. But I think to your point, I think there's an argument where there could be other things in that category, but we just say, oh, well, it's just R. It's just restricted.
I don't know, man. Even I'm sure you winced a little bit or a little queasy with like some of the curb stomping, like insane. Like that
was like rough. Yeah,
that's beyond flagrant. Yeah. But anyways, you get my point.
But going back to that early, let's say, artistic scene that's challenging her character. Do you think that? So I guess first, do you think Mima should? Because what happens is that this scene really doesn't affect her psychologically. Because even for her, it's the game. Yeah. And so, do you think? So this is an opinionated question. Do you think she should have done that scene, or like, do you think she should have? Like, if you were in her shoes, would you have been like, hey, maybe I want to get there, but let's do baby steps first, or you just gone like her?
It's hard because, and that's the issue with kind of being celebrity or Hollywood. Oftentimes, I feel like you're forced to do things that you're not always comfortable with. Otherwise, you feel like you won't be given the opportunities in the future, and it's hard to say where you kind of should stand. Should basically like make the conscious decision to uphold your morals versus taking the risk, kind of compromising that for the sake of greater opportunity. It's like hard to say. Like that's why this gets as an interesting film, because it even touches upon our entertainment culture here in the States, where I feel like a lot of actresses, especially coming out of the Me Too movement, historically have felt pressure from Hollywood for, sleeping with certain executives, which might have compromised some of their moral code to try to gain advancement within the industry. I'm not saying it's right. It's just like a lot of stories have come out regarding that. And it's hard to say, like, it depends on you, like, in necessarily where you draw those lines.
Yeah, it's been a Hollywood problem for a long time. The casting.
Forever. I will say one other thing that this film really reminded me of, and it just happened that I watched.
Sorry to interrupt, but the fact that we have a term, I just like how Hollywood's like in denial. But it's like we had a term on the low key they called the casting couch for decades.
Forever, dude.
Yeah, what do you mean it was never happening?
But everyone knew it was just kind of like swept under the rug. We're like, it was kept on the down low, basically.
Probably still is, but anyways, go ahead.
Of course, like, never mind. I was gonna go somewhere else. We're not gonna go there. But what I will say is something that this film definitely reminded me of was, and it just so happened that I watched this like at this point. So like I might not have had this strong an example. This film really reminded me of like what kind of happened with Britney Spears, where she was like a huge pop star like when we were kids, right? Massive. Like everyone was a huge Spears fan. Kind of went through this crazy time, and then she was turned crazy, and someone, what do you call it when someone makes the decisions for you?
You
Do you know what I'm talking about, like legally?
Power of attorney.
Well, yeah, something like that. Like the I think it was her dad or someone else had power of attorney making all of her decisions, and it wasn't necessarily some of the decisions you would read. Well, like she had a residency she was forced to stay at and couldn't do anything. It was really weird in many ways. It reminded me of this film. Like that was kind of one of the strongest examples I could think of with Spears in terms of some of the themes that were brought up in this movie. Sorry, that was just one thing that really came to mind.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I like the Miley analogy because like this fictional character went through in some ways the same, well, not as intense, the same transition. Because like I already explained like Hannah Montana all the way to whatever she is now, but it's like this is the transition when you try to do this like idol, pure angel to like let's say a human, and who's more let's say grit and human, like more of a reflection of human nature. But anyways, I just wanted to ask because like I think like sometimes they are constrained, but it's still a person's choice whether they want to like how comfortable are doing certain actions and certain roles, like you said. Like, but one character I don't think there was really a defense for, because at least with the screenplay writer who gets killed, like you could be like, well, he's trying to give her a role to fit what she wants, even though maybe he's being overzealous because she's not really like pushing back. But the that photographer giving the risque photos, I was like, okay, that's just
yeah, I did not like. There were a lot of scenes that made me very uncomfortable in this film, which I think is kudos to it because that's what the film was going for.
That's definitely it's definitely it was really weird. I remember watching that and I was like, yeah, I don't know if you're gonna really we're gonna be able to defend your potential killing because
no, definitely not,
because like that's rough, and the and like it was very, and it was also in the same vein, like he was picking back at that photographer was picking back off like let's get rid of the the angel like figure of Mima, which actually, even though it was portrayed in a very perverted way in this film, again, a lot of American celebrities do this too, right? They do the swimsuit magazine or they do the Vogue risque cover shoot, just to change their persona. Like, to your point, this film is ahead of its time because this is before like
I mean, what a lot of people do today, Chris, which we critiqued a lot, is they set up an OnlyFans.
But that's not being risque. That's just making money. I was actually listening to an interview with an OnlyFans, like one of the top British OnlyFans models.
I
think she said that she makes like 20 grand a month.
Yeah.
And this is the top. It's not the people not making money.
And I was like jaw dropped.
I was like, okay. And she's like hot, but I'm like, but I see a lot of hot girls all the time. Like, what? Like nasty girl, dude. Anyways,
yeah, but part of it is like how far you're willing to go.
Oh yeah, she was sharing a story about how like as a to get herself to blow up, she did a challenge where she just said like first 20 dudes to DM, you can come and smash me, and like she said she was super exhausted after that day, but like I wanted to throw up, bro. I was like, I'm done, dude. I'm ready to go back. I'm ready to wait. Where's the Bible study? I need to go to Bible study. Are you kidding? Nasty, bro.
That's like what is it like the top OnlyFans account? I think it's Black China. She's bringing in 20 million a year.
Let's go toxic masculinity. But yeah, I'm done, dude. Like this society's done.
Anyway, that's wild. Anyway,
but yeah, it's but it's one of those things where you start realizing people. Anyways, sorry, going back to Perfect Blue, but like people, the exploitation of women is something that I think is well documented and discussed, so we won't get into it. But that photographer is trying to piggyback off of her wanting to be more adult, we'll call it the word. But the way it's portrayed, that's why I think this film is a film that like you have to kind of what I say watch, is because like if you don't watch it, like you're gonna miss, like if you just read the plot, you're not gonna get it. Like it's portraying a very
you have to watch it.
Yeah, it's portrayed in a very like not in a very like sexualized way where you're like, okay, I see what you're getting at here. That this is like but anyways, that leads us to what I think one of the most important characters, Uchida, our super fan. I'm gonna call him a super fan. That's gonna be my nickname for him.
Mm-hmm.
So this super fan has a parasocial relationship with Mima. This is before we even really talked about parasocial relationships in our modern society. That's why this film also is surviving the age of the test of time, because the stalker, super fan, whatever we want to call him, is something that's an archetype that's become more popular today, especially as more people become celebrities. So, but for better or worse, what you just said with the OnlyFans, they're actually kind of celebrities now from a lesser tier.
Oh, they are, for sure.
And so they have the same kind of parasocial relationship with their audience, I'm going to say. And this film is doing this in let's say, a different era. And I think also kind of like peeking into the future. So this character, he's super fan. He finds this website called Mima's Room. He thinks he's talking to the real Mima. But what I wanted to touch upon is, did you think Satoshi Kon's characterization of the super fan was actually fair? Because something I've always debated is that he made him ugly. I get that there are types like this, but there's also a lot of super fans that you wouldn't know, and we would just say they're my coworker. I didn't know that they have rooms of pictures of like this.
That was my biggest issue with this movie, is their portrayal of him being kind of so creepy. I feel like it would have been better if they made him not as bad, so that you didn't kind of get that visceral reaction, because that's how most super fans are. They're not. You don't always know they're crazy off the bat.
So I have a theory of why he did this.
Okay.
And I'm going to just confirm the generations, because I just want to make sure I get this correctly. So Satoshi Kon is from he comes from a period of anime which was still kind of what I consider so they're only 3 years apart. So basically, we all know Miyazaki, right? They're the forefathers. Satoshi Kon and actually Anno are from the generation after. So they come up in a period of anime before. If you watch anime of this, like that 60s, 70s, even, and when they start getting into in the 80s, it's still a different style, and also I would say still kind of cartoonish, but in their like real themes and stories. I'm gonna call them I don't want to say the word incel on this pod, but let's say the super fan / otaku culture.
Yeah, why can't you say incel? That's fine.
Okay. The otaku culture starts blowing up in the late, I would say early 90s. And so what I do know, I'm speculating here because I've only read Anno's interviews on this. Anno, by the way, is the famous director for Evangelion. But they're 3 years apart. I think my theory has always been that Satoshi Kon and him, they come from a generation of anime, directors and artists that they've always disliked these fans. And that's why we've always viewed them as like the warts of this industry. It's always interesting to me because like they're the ones that also pumping it up and all the money. They're the ones who buy.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they rake in all. Who do you think is buying all the merch?
Who do you think is buying all the Mima merch, dude?
Yeah.
But at the same time, they've hated how like they've had to placate to this group,
this audience. Basically.
Yeah, because they have certain expectations of what the archetypes of the woman should be and like how they should look and stuff, and what the storyline should be. So my theory, because I've watched this twice, and that's why I'm asking you the question, is because I actually think that super fans or these stalkers are not just ugly dudes with the camera like in the crowd. Yes, there are some like that, but there are also like normal dudes who are probably married. So like going back to the OnlyFans example, and it's always kind of like been a little pet peeve of mine how like I get it, you dislike these fans, but at the same time, like they're part of your industry, and like you can't just like dismiss them as if they're like trash, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, it's not just like an obsession of super fans of like I can even think of like who was it that died in like '78? It was killed by kind of a stalker, John Lennon, right? He was killed by like a super fan of his, basically, and like shot to death in New York City, right? I doubt, like, I don't know, but like this portrayal that there's like this, of him being very stereotypical, that just, I get what you're saying, but that just, I was like, this is not super genuine, and it could have made the film stronger if they didn't present him quite in that way.
Yeah.
That was my like one gripe with this movie.
Yeah, no, it's one that, I mean, I'm raising it because it's one that I've thought about, and I understand like ripping otaku culture and these super fans, but I think it does a disservice when you say, oh, they're like the abnormal weird ones. When like we have seen this is where Satoshi Kon, as much as he's been a visionary, he was wrong. This is way more common than we would like to let on.
Oh yeah,
and I think only
culture.
Yeah, and I think OnlyFans and also big YouTube culture has been the proof of this. Again, he didn't live to see it, so that's his defense. But that's kind of like the one thing I agree on is that like I think that's something he missed. I think he thought like, oh, this is something that's just if we call it out, it'll go away. Nah, it's gone worse over time.
To his credit, though, and I think this is the twist, is in the end, it wasn't really him who was the crazy super fan. It was the one that we didn't expect.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, so to his credit, I will say that was a twist I didn't see coming. I think that might have also been the reason he decided to go in that direction, to kind of deceive us or make us think, oh, it's got to be him.
Yeah, but he also made that other manager really fat and not pretty.
So. Well, okay, yeah, sure. Did he play on some stereotypes? Sure, but to be credited, now I'm thinking about it, it's like, oh, maybe that was also his point.
I don't think so, but I know how these guys thought. They're from the same era. They're like,
yeah, but you get my point. I mean, yeah, but the proof is like what he actually put out there. In the end, it wasn't Uchida who was like the super fan acting on his own. It was really the mastermind, the one you didn't really expect, who seemed kind of normal, who had her best interest at heart, and really at the end.
Yeah, well, but I would still, then I'll counter argue that like even though he did that twist with the mastermind, he really portrayed this guy as an idiot that would follow any order and like do whatever.
But to be fair, there are people like that.
Yeah,
you talk about how stupid people are in society is really.
They are very stupid people.
Yeah. Anyway,
but I think so. I would like to get into the meteor things. So what I think this movie really is about is identity. Is about the perception of yourself, how others perceive you, where it's the balance between.
And I would say also doubt is a big thing.
Doubt is, yes, you're right. Doubt is a big theme. I think like being like introspective, but I think what's interesting, what I think Satoshi Kon was trying to get at is that like we always tend to think that our identity is like, you know, what we perceive of ourselves.
It's what others perceive of us.
But it is also, there's a balance. I realize that what he's getting at, there's a balance of what others perceive you to be, what you perceive yourself to be. And it's not, because I've read philosophers are like, it's what you believe inside. But it's like, what he's getting at is that, no, the reality is actually it's you and whatever this relationship you have with
others,
the people with others, how they perceive you is also your reality. And you have to live with that. And I think that's because we always see the examples of like, oh, others are perceiving you this, like, the outside perceptions and picking you too hard. You got to shut out the noise, blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, this movie challenged you with the fact that like, yeah, you could try to do that. But the reality is that you can't really function in the real world unless you're the only person in the society.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it is that balance of like, you need to not lose yourself, but also understand that you also can't be so naive and be like, oh, my reality is I'm XYZ. And look, we've seen this, right? Like, what's the famous Atlanta episode where the guy thinks he's like white, like his reality is that.
You love that episode,
I
the
love that
transracial episode.
Yeah, but it's like a perfect example of what I think Satoshi Kon is trying to hit at, is that like you think you could say your reality is a certain thing, but like the real world still exists, and it's this balance of, because you also don't want the real world, if they say like you're, whatever, you're a thug. That's another example, which we'll get into that in the in that Straight Outta Compton film. But like, if the world tells you you're a thug, but you're like, no, I'm not a criminal, I'm not a thug. Like it's so like, and that's extreme example, right? One is like delusional, the other one is like standing firm because it's not a real depiction of who they are, but they have to deal with it, right? And they still have to, it's that balance. And I think Satoshi Kon is trying to get you to think about how, yes, you can have your own identity, but it gets muddled with like how you perceive yourself, like you said, the doubt you have, and also the external realities. And it's very, very deep. Yeah. Go ahead.
I will say though, yes, like it is both, but it's also kind of how you portray yourself, or how you put yourself out there to society also influences how they view you or they see you. And my whole point is like to your point, if you're like viewed as a thug, right? Part of it is kind of the attitude, the energy, like how you dress. That all gives off that perception that society takes in the whole. I'm not saying that's fair. That's just reality. If you're just wearing a suit going to that, no matter how you look, most people aren't necessarily going to perceive you as such, if that makes sense. Like off the bat, like appearance does matter. I think that was part of the issue with the main character. She thought that she could leverage her stardom as a K-pop star to make a seamless transition and become a big actor star. But it was much harder than she viewed, and most people didn't see her as such because she was pigeonholed really as a K-pop star. No one off the bat really wanted to see her as an actress, even though that's really what she wanted others to see of her.
That's correct. Yep. Yeah. No. I agree. I see.
I mean, it's complicated, right? Identity is complicated, but you can't act. And my whole point is like, yes, it's both, right? What society views you as and how you see yourself, but kind of like how you put yourself out in society kind of infers how people see you too.
Yeah. But then those inferences are also usually driven, or not driven. They're usually like,
sorry, you cut out for a second. What did you say?
I said those inferences. So like, right, you said like if you dress like a thug versus a suit, right? That's a good example. But why is I can name you a lot of guys in suits who I view as gangsters.
Oh, I agreed, man. I'm not saying it's right, but that's just how it is. And I don't think you disagree with that, right?
Yeah, but you can change it, though. I know
we had a couple instances of us walking around New York City I could think of where kind of the like how we were necessarily dressing or like attitude we were given kind of influenced certain situations. I'm thinking the one specifically when we went to Fordham, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but that's but that's because people have these prejudgments and it's biased.
Agreed. But you see where I'm getting at.
Yeah, but I will say that the worst gangsters I know.
Agreed. I have a negative view of them, but society as a whole doesn't necessarily.
I know. We'll get into when I finally pick Wall Street, dude. I gotta get to that film. That might actually be my next one.
Which one are you gonna pick? Margin Call?
No, we did that one.
We did. That's right. That was a great film, by the way.
Yeah, no,
we'll biggest thugs in the country.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Oh yeah, I don't want to hear anything about some Staples how he dresses. I want to hear about these real thugs, dude. The people that really steal. The real gangsters are the ones in suits.
Anyway, we're getting on our soapbox now. But anyways,
but
get back to the film.
Yeah. So, but actually, this is why I think it's a good film actually to show like maybe like a senior in high school, because I think a lot of things that teenagers grow up with, the doubt like you're talking about, and the identity crisis of how I'm perceived and who I am. And my personal opinion now is that if that gap is too big, it becomes problematic for the individual. if their personal, what they think of their persona is and their outside persona is because I think there's always a gap, unfortunately, because you can't control other people's minds.
No.
So, but if that gap is too big, I think this is when you end up into issues, and you see this a lot with extreme celebrities. Like they're the perfect like epitome examples of this at times. But even I think in your own personal life, if who you are privately, let's say you are okay, I'll give you the practical example. You are a gay guy, but in public you're dating women. Like eventually this is gonna catch up, at some point in your life. Maybe not immediately, but it happens to everybody, right? And so I was just curious to like ask you, like, in your own, basically, like when you're watching this, obviously you're watching as a older individual, but like when it comes to those topics of like identity and doubt, I was just curious to your take on even using your own life's perspective. Like, has there been times where, like, let's say you've been an extreme example like Mima, but like, has there been times where this has played like something you've had to deal with? Like, oh, I feel one thing, I think this is my identity, but people have this perception that I'm not this, or like I'm something else. I mean, it could be as basic. It could be as basic.
Yeah,
as
I don't know.
People not thinking you're Mexican or not. I don't know. It could be as basic as that. But
Yeah,
I was thinking like
I would say it's more down in terms of certain choices you make, or like do you really want certain things that you think you do? But in terms of like as a whole, no, not quite to that degree. Have like yeah, so like on my dad's side, they're from Mexico, and no one ever suspects that I have red hair, blah blah blah. Americans generally tend to think that you cross the southern border, there was no European colonization for, whatever reason. But yeah, so I guess to that level, sure. Like it's like, okay, like you always have doubt, or people don't necessarily see you as such, if that makes sense. Like that's kind of like I feel like what a lot of different people go through, especially in a melting pot of the U.S., because we have so many different people from all over the world, that certain people's perceptions just aren't always informed by reality or their limitations in knowledge, right? So you kind of have that, and it kind of plays. Atlanta's a good show that kind of delves into that on a deeper level with identity, specifically of African Americans, and really just Black people as a whole, because you even have talk of Nigerians. But anyway, I kind of digress. So to that degree, yes, but like kind of on the level of these artists, no, because I'm just not a creative, and I feel like people in the entertainment industry have this added level of like, am I making art, or like are people seeing me as truly an actor or an actress or a singer? And do people really like my music? Like you hear all of these insecurities coming out from artists. And I just never had it to that degree.
Yeah, I guess what I'm also trying to get at, that's more of a, let's say, non-artist angle, even though I think to your point, artists have like the
it's a totally different
easier medium to show this problem. But I think people have this even if they're not artists. Like I remember listening to, I follow this guy that he got big on TikTok by like having bowls of, people write anonymous notes and he reads them. And he read one that there was a woman who, we don't know her name, but like, and obviously she could have made it up, but let's just say she didn't for the sake of this story. Mm-hmm. She wrote that like she had a daughter because that's what people thought she should do, but she still thinks about maybe her life would have been better off if she had just aborted the kid. And like, it's like
you're talking about like regrets and things like that. Sure, yeah.
Or even like you were a mom, but like you never felt like you should have been. Like you didn't really want to be.
There's more expectations that you feel like society places on you. I don't know if that's necessarily identity or doubt, though.
Yeah, well, maybe not doubt. I think identity. I was focused more on the identity aspect. Like you could perceive yourself. So here's another example. I know somebody that I think who they perceive themselves to be is bigger than who they actually are. Like I think they perceive themselves to be this moralistic.
Yeah, it's just like delusions of like grandeur, though.
But it all ties with identity, which is why I think Perfect Blues identity, the topic of identity is I think doubt obviously does play a part, but I think identity is like one of the critical themes, because the identity is something that is very like, it's not tangible, right? It's something that's like in the air, right? It's in your mind. It's what's perceived around you.
Yeah.
And I think like, you know, even at the end, I think that final scene is very telling, where they just can't believe that she's visiting there. But she does the last line of like, I'm the real, you know, Mima. Like, no, this is, you know. And I think that whole like what's fake, what's not authentic, what's muddled in the between is something that I think every human goes through. And probably why Perfect Blue still resonates with people today, because I think people have this like, I am this person to my family, but I really want to be this way. And, you know, and I just see over and over again, even through social media, are examples of this. Like, this woman wouldn't have written that note if she didn't really feel that way. She didn't really feel that like, oh, you know, I thought I wanted this. This is how I was raised. And suddenly I'm like,
yeah, it's more regret. And it's like, do you really want to, but that's kind of like, so I guess it is down in terms of some decisions.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's necessarily identity or just realizing that, you know, what society's I don't even know of like how they view you, but expectations of you just don't necessarily coincide with what you really wanted. If that makes sense. Like it's harder to necessarily point it out, like some of the themes of like identity outside, like as strong outside of like art. You know, I mean, think of other movies that we've really reviewed. They always use either musicians or theater to try to get this point across. I'm thinking of like The Sound of Metal. Right, it took him throughout the entire film to come to grips with his reality and really truly be at peace. Right at the end, with losing his ability as an identity as a musician. Same thing with, in as much as I got annoyed with this film because it was too scattered, but you love this film. Same thing with New York Schenectady. The same thing where like all of those issues of identity or how the whole thing of postmodern of him viewing himself one way, or in reality, you get bits and pieces of really how people viewed him, right, throughout the film in this kind of chaotic way. And that was the same thing, right? And so, like, it's just really, it's hard to necessarily point these things of perception because, like, by trade, I can say, yeah, I'm a scientist. It's like no one really fully doubts that, right? In terms of your career or profession, I doubt anyone really sees you when they talk to you or know you. It's anything in terms of your work is anything other than a programmer. Whereas it's more subjective in the artistic world because it's like, oh, like you're an actor, but you're a bad actor. You just like a comedian. There's a lot more layers to that, I feel like.
Well, I think that to your point, that's why they use that medium, because it's easier to portray. But I think everybody kind of has this to a degree. I'm still because I think what the medium is trying to portray, and I think it's an age-old question, but I think Satoshi Kon has this opinion, which he shares in this film, is that what's more real? The perception of those around you? Is that what reality really is, or is it the perception of yourself? And if that gets muddled by yeah. And so I think that's kind of like the question. Like you might perceive yourself as a scientist, but maybe others just perceive you as like I don't know, like they don't view you because they didn't know you before you were a scientist. I don't know, like, because also when people meet you, right? Like when before you had a career.
Oftentimes people, like I even have that where you get first impressions of someone, and that's wrong. Like the more you get to know them.
Exactly. And so it's very like I said, it's a very like age-old question, because I think like this identity thing has also been something that's been studied for a long time, you know.
Sure. Yeah. And but like to your point with like that other example, I think some people just like you see it where they have total delusions about how they are or act. And they just don't like it's clear they don't see like some of the reasons they do some things, whereas others can see it clear as day.
Yeah. Anyways, the final stretch of this, I'll let you lead it, but I'll kick it off with what do you think of that final sequence of the reveal of Rumi
when she wakes up in the fake room?
Yeah.
You're like, wait, the dead fish. Like there was a little gasp I had, and I was like, oh snap! Like you realize exactly what's going on in that moment.
And then she dresses up as Mima, and then,
that was so creepy. I didn't like that.
And then how she like prioritized getting the wig versus her safety, and she impaled it. And then like how she thought the lights was Idols. I was
Yeah,
like,
the
this is
idol star.
wild. I was like, wild
It,
last sequence, dude. I was like, this is
it's
crazy.
crazy level of. It was the most interesting portrayal of psychosis I think I might have seen on film.
It was
I
wild.
don't like. I'm trying to think of another. Nah, nothing's coming to mind quite like that. I was like, wow. Oh, like this that scene hitting in a different way. Kudos to Khan, man. They had some great moments in this movie.
You did. You did. One of the greats.
Yeah, you asked my thoughts. I think it was cool. I love the way it was directed from them, kind of like she was jumping from building, and then you kind of see the creepiness of her just kind of floating down from building. I don't know. It was some. That's what my whole point. If you try to do that in live action, it might have looked a little too corny. Whereas in the animation medium, it seemed right.
Yeah. Also, when she was seeing like the other Mima, that was interesting too. In her
Yeah,
mind.
yeah. And then it kind of flipped between the other Mima versus like her herself, kind of
Yeah.
in the fake wig. Yeah.
Yeah. Oof. Yeah.
Yeah, I had no issues with how the film ended.
Yeah, what's interesting is that it touches upon not just psychosis, but like also how like people tend to mimic. It reminds me of what the famous philosopher Rene Girard always wrote about how like people mimic other people.
Mhm.
It's like it's something that we just do as I think part of human nature that we mimic what we perceive as like uh, things that will give us higher social status. So and that's why like people will mimic other business tycoons, leaders of industry, artists, there's a lot of like, yeah, you do your own thing, but there's a like there's a little bit of still of like of the past, and yeah, he's no, he's yeah, he's a very important thinker for the audience. I mean, it influenced many people who unfortunately have way too much power in our society, but
Right.
yeah, cough, all in. Anyways, But yeah, his most famous theory is actually the scapegoat theory that he studied like almost all every culture he could, and he found that like some of the what helps a society move on or heal is to scapegoat somebody or something.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, this trauma always exists in the mind of society. I was like, wow, that's like. I was like, wait, I thought this was more well studied, but I was just when I read his like piece on it, I was like, oh, okay, like it's something that I think we intuitively know, but nobody took the time ever to like study it in and out of like every example possible. So, but yeah, it's also why like when there's a failure, it's also why in sports, when there's a failure, we often like we have a reason to blame, right? A ref, a player, like we just can't accept that like sometimes, the other team is just better. Or like the same thing with like I think I read the analysis of like, it's the same thing with like when you get rejected from a job or a girl or something that like you rationalize it with some kind of scapegoating,
Mm-hmm.
like feminism, toxic, whatever, like the feminism or whatever. When reality, you just might not be her type or you might not be that good looking. And it's easier to accept the other stuff than the reality. When I read that like years ago, I was like, that is brutal. This is why nobody like reads this.
Of course not.
Because like what you're basically saying is that like, dude, this is the card you were dealt, dude. Like, and you're gonna have to learn how to cope and strive through that. But because you can give yourself a scapegoat, you can get over that trauma faster. When I read that, I thought that was really insightful. I was like, oh, so that explains a lot of our modern culture. It's like, oh, it's not me, it's toxic masculinity.
Mm-hmm.
It's I
Or a scapegoat. Like
yeah, you scapegoat it. And like we actually what I really like is the micro of it. Like we scapegoat a lot of little things we don't realize. So that's an example. We scapegoat like maybe like why we, I got this wrong in a test because the problem was hard, or if I just had a little more time to study, but it's like it's still your fault, right? Your responsibility. So it's like it was a very interesting way to frame it. And I was just like, dang, like if people thought more like this, I think we would see a lot more prescription drug scripts and like more therapy, because we don't realize how much scapegoating we do to help us cope. It's like crazy. So I'm trying to do less. I'm trying to do less scapegoating these days. So
okay.
Anyways, that's my long monologue.
I mean, I agree. I mean, you see this all the time.
Yeah,
Not really much more I can add to that.
yeah, that's my little soapbox. You know, I love soapboxing, as you know. So
On certain aspects, yes.
what do you mean? On everything. Well, my favorite thing is when I tell people I have no opinions.
Yeah, I hate that so much because that's just nonsense.
I know. Anyways, we can get to final ratings and then
Yeah, why don't we do that?
Yeah, I'll go first since it was your pick. I would say Perfect Blue, one of the best movies I've saw in my youth, and it's a film that I still think is probably more impactful to people who don't think about these topics. So I would, lean towards seniors in high school or early college days. And yeah, I would say not many issues in terms of style. It was done really well. Yeah, I could nitpick some of the portrayals of some characters, but in the end, I think its message gets across. You could watch this movie actually probably multiple times, like I did. Obviously, with some break, because the twist isn't going to hit the same way anymore, but you could still enjoy it and watch it and remind yourself of what this movie was trying to tell you or challenge you on, which I always appreciate. So 9 out of 10.
Yeah, this film was a lot to discuss. A lot of films. I really like the kind of the originality of the idea, and I say that because this was made in the '90s. I don't think there were a lot of films that were really touching these kind of topics, and especially in the way they did it, as Perfect Blue did. So I give kudos to Satoshi for this and his team for coming up with the script. I really like the kind of anime style they're drawing, and this is very much indicative of the '90s. So that's a little bit of my bias too. The only things that really I thought were wrong is I just didn't really like the way they portrayed some of the stereotypes of some of the characters, specifically the stalker Lucina. Other than that, there wasn't too much I could really critique. I really liked the ending. There were a lot of good plot twists with this movie as well. I'm gonna have to give it a 9 out of 10.
Nice.
And yeah, I think
a rare tie.
Rare tie. We don't have too many of those. Although Chris has been giving for the last couple of films, I think you've been giving higher ratings than I have, which is a bit of a plot twist.
Yeah, Secretary. Well, the ones I picked, I've been higher than you. I would say I was way lower on Fremont.
Fremont, sure. Well, what did I give it, a 7?
No, you gave it a 5.5.
Oh, yeah.
And I gave it a 4.5. But recent trend has been if you picked it, you're higher, and then if I picked it,
fair enough.
I've been higher. But what's interesting is that whenever I pick some films that you really like Sound of Metal, you've been way higher.
Oh yeah, that's top tier. How you can give that a 10? I was so now
I had my opinions, dude. Hey, not everybody give it a 10. I read many reviewers that were like,
yeah, they're stupid. I don't pick reviewers.
You know what's funny?
One of the greatest.
Watched that film.
Hold on. One of the greatest, and it's funny because we're critiquing. We're almost like critics, just on a very low key scale. One of my favorite film scenes ever in cinema history is Michael Keaton in his interaction in Birdman with the critic. That is one of the all-time greatest scenes ever.
Yeah, we still gotta do Birdman, but I remember watching Sound of Metal. I told you too. I was like, Alexis, I finished this film. You're gonna love this movie, dude. This is your movie, dude. This is legitimately your movie. It's not about just music, but it's about
everything.
It's about like
identity, all that
identity. Yeah. I was like, this movie was made for you, dude. And I was called it. I was like, of course, you're gonna give it 10 out of 10. I was like, it's a great movie.
How couldn't you? Especially with the ending. When he finally takes the earpieces off and it comes to
that was brilliant. Yes, but I was like, I remember watching it. I was like, I was actually by coincidence. I was like, I need more. But this is when I had more time to research what films to pick.
You wanted to pick, which is a film I'd seen with Lady Gaga and
the Fault of Our Star, not Fault.
No. And Bradley Cooper.
I know.
They in theaters.
Because it's the one that the Hollywood loves to remake every generation.
I can't remember for life me the name.
What was it called? I actually want to look it up now. It's bothering me.
And then you came across this movie.
From a Star is Born, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's because like it's one that's remade over and over again. I didn't realize it's been remade like 4 times.
I think 3 times. I think this is the third time.
Yeah, it's like each generation of Hollywood wants to tackle this timeless story, and I was like, really, that's that timeless? Okay,
It's kind of for
Hollywood, but yeah, I remember, and I was just like, I don't know. I then I was like, no, I'm gonna pick this one because this one seems like way like more up your wheelhouse. Like this was
it was one
like
of my favorite films ever.
It's a true character journey, and it's a true like it actually makes you question how much of your like if you lost something that important.
But I also love their interactions with when he goes to like
the rehab,
the death rehab. I was like, this is so good, so interesting.
Yeah, and he had to learn acceptance, and he lost everything, right? The girl, the career,
lost everything, and then tried getting her back, I believe.
Yeah, that didn't. She because she was in love with the man that he was, not the one he is now.
Yeah.
Which is like very powerful because like that happens a lot with like divorces, right? Like
it's the idea that you have in your head of that person.
Yeah, and this is something that everybody wants to use like the example of like divorce as like because I listen to this guy called Scott Galloway, and he always says like when a guy loses his job, like he gets divorced, and it's like it's because it touches on this same topic of like you married a person and that person's particular time, or they said the idea of them, and something's changed, that things have changed, new information has come in, and I think that movie just did it without the money, which is I think important because people will always be like, oh, you're a gold digger, but like if somebody you care about was like really good painter and they lost their hand so they can't paint anymore, it does challenge you as the other partner of like, did I really like this person because they were them or because they had the skill that was them, but now it's not them. It's that's
why, and I think you will agree with this, but you remember this is why Atlanta was so brilliant to me, was it touched a lot of these topics on a deeper level in a very unique way. So, and I'm thinking specifically, do you remember in the 3rd season when Paperboy's in, I believe they're in Budapest, and he like can't find his phone.
I remember and
he has that interaction with that weird white kid, which ends up being kind of like his inner personality. He's like,
I remember this.
Like I'm going through. He's like, I don't know what I'm going to do. He's like, I haven't been able to write. I haven't been the same. He's like, I need my phone. That was like the core to him, and like he just saw himself in kind of the nakedness of not being able to create, of not being a rapper. And I was like, this is such a crazy way of kind of going at identity in that way. I don't know. That's just something that came to mind with that. But yeah, do you have any other thoughts?
Nope.
All right. I think that does it for this week's episode. So if you enjoyed our commentary on this, please like and subscribe to our channel and stay tuned for a controversial pick by my co-host for the 95 cult classic Kids. So we'll see. I'll give you my thoughts next week.
I don't think it's that controversial, but whatever.
We'll see. I don't know. And on that note, we're out, and just stay tuned.